What's up? So I'm still working on my 100 paintings challenge that I came up with to try to celebrate reaching 100 subscribers on YouTube. I think this video is going to be really fun because I tried to take a little bit of a different approach from an imagination, creativity perspective from the last batch that I did, the first 30. Stick around and I'll walk you through how I came up with all these ideas, and I hope you find it interesting.
Let's get some paper on the wall. So for the first couple minutes, I'm just going to talk through how I came up with the individual images or the ideas for each of the images that I came up with and how one subject led to another. I've been drawing lots of birds over the last year or so, so I decided, why not? I'll start with a bird. Of course, I mean abstract birds, not realistic ones. And that led to 2 or 3 birds. And from there, I liked these heads, so I decided I would do a whole bunch of bird heads together. Then I chose to do some birds that were more geometric shapes. Up to this point, all the birds have been sitting, so I thought, you know what, I hardly ever draw birds flying. Why don't I try that? Drawing this bird reminded me of a Native American thunderbird, so I drew that next. Drawing these circles made me think of eggs, so in the next drawing I did some very abstract eggs and then a nest. So drawing the eggs made me think of spring, and so then I thought of a butterfly. And the pattern on the butterfly reminded me of an orb spider. So I drew an orb spider really quick, and then I went back and did another butterfly. So I thought the eyes on this butterfly wing was really cool. And it's also nearly Halloween, so I did a whole bunch of scary eyes together. And for some reason that reminded me of a bear drawing I did once, so I did that next. And after drawing this grumpy bear face, I felt compelled to make some sweet bunnies. And all of the drawings up until now have been about nature, so I decided I would work on some abstract landscapes. Some with trees, some with mountains, just whatever I could think of. And these landscapes started to remind me of Looney Tunes and all the crazy backgrounds that you used to see in those cartoons, and so I did a whole bunch of abstract, weird, I guess you could call them landscapes, but I'm not even sure what they are. I think this one was a mix between the crazy abstract landscapes and the bird nest. I also wanted to mention how important it is to keep a sketchbook with all your old sketches in it nearby. Some of these drawings reminded me of some older sketches I'd done of suns and symbols and mountains and fire with faces on them, and so I referred back to those old sketches to do this next set. The fire in particular seemed kind of primal or tribal, and so I ended up doing a tiki face. So I was pretty excited to start painting and actually jumped right in without masking in between the drawings like I did last time. I decided I wanted to try to use tape instead of the fluid mask. Thought I'd share this really cool tip that a buddy of mine, another artist and mentor, Frank Ford, gave me, which was to put the tape on your clothes and get some lint on it to sort of help it reduce its adhesiveness, which will keep it from tearing the paper. For some reason, I almost always start with primary colors. Not really sure. I'm just attracted to bright colors. Maybe it reminds me of childhood or something. For some reason, I get really nervous when I'm covering up my sketches, like I can't draw them again or something. In this case, it made no sense to try to paint in between the sketch, so I just painted over it and kind of started over and drew it with a paintbrush. I wanted to mention how sometimes I feel like I want to keep these simple shapes clean and flat and have crisp edges, but in reality, if I wanted to do that, I would just design this in a computer or some other method. This style of painting for me is really more about discovery and adventure and exploring, and so generally speaking, the more texture and layers I add, the more interesting the paintings become. In fact, later on you'll see this painting doesn't even look like this anymore. It looks completely different. As I was painting these really abstract shapes that I said reminded me of Looney Tunes cartoons, I was actually thinking about music, and I was thinking about um, Kandinsky and the way he was trying to translate music visually in his paintings. So the next good bit of video here is mostly going to be time lapse. I speeded up quite a bit just because it took me hours and hours over several days, actually probably 3 or 4 days, to get this to a point where I felt like it was good enough. It's often hard to tell when things are finished. There's a point I think where it feels like if you keep going, it's really not going to get any better, or at least it's time to move on and do something different. We're obviously far from that point here. So over the next few days, I basically just tried to get down a single layer of acrylic paint on every single square and try not to get caught up in too many details. Although I did take the flying bird and the graphic native symbol pretty much to completion, as well as that one abstract piece up on the top right. But for the most part, I was just using the same colors and just moving around the entire piece, trying to fill in all the white space. So here's how it turned out when I had pretty much one solid layer covering the entire piece. There are a few white areas, but for the most part it was all covered. I almost always come back with a second pass with darker and lighter colors, using a palette knife or a small brush and just building up texture, and even using a toothpick sometimes, as you can see here. And it's pretty chaotic. I'm just using my intuition, sort of going over the whole piece, finding areas that I feel like could use more definition or contrast. And it's a pretty nice technique. It works pretty well. Coming up, I'll show you a close-up of kind of how the palette knife works, making sharp, distinct lines. I think part of this exercise is interesting because it's neat to see these little images next to each other. It kind of felt like it was a choose your own adventure exploration type thing, and um, I feel like it gives me an opportunity to explore some different subject matter and think about how I might expand on this concept of putting little windows into experiences next to each other and tell a story through art in a way that I haven't really thought of before. In the end, I'm going to cut all these up into individual paintings, though, and like I did with the first set, and I will end up probably putting together a video that shows all 100 paintings side by side, or in a slideshow format. My buddy Frank Ford's suggestion worked really well. The tape came off of the painting very cleanly without tearing any of the paper. I did have to double check to make sure there weren't any large pieces of lint or hair sticking off the side of the tape that would get into the paint, though, so just watch out for that. So yeah, here's how all these turned out, and I was pretty excited about it. I haven't varnished these yet, obviously I haven't cut them apart. I did sign them all individually, and I like how they look next to each other. We'll see how I feel about them when they're all into separate little paintings, but I'd love to hear, which ones do you like? What do you think is interesting, and what do you think is interesting about this sort of process and technique? Let me know. And as I mentioned in the last video, I am gonna at some point have some of these, if not all of them, available on my Etsy shop at a super affordable price with a coupon code, so that anyone who's a fan or likes this stuff and wants one can pick one up cheaply. So stay tuned for that. And if you made it this far, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Do consider subscribing if you haven't. I could use all the support I can get, and it really means a lot to me for you guys to comment and let me know what you think. And take care. We'll see you next time.